Have you ever noticed that when a younger woman talks about an older man, her eyes light up in a different way? It's not about money. It's not about the car. It's not about status. It's about one thing that almost nobody your age actually practices. And I'm going to hand it to you piece by piece, all the way to number 11, which is the most dangerous one of all. Stay with me until the end, because number 7 alone is going to make you rethink every relationship you've ever had. And before I even keep talking, I want you to go ahead and hit that like button right now. Not later, right now, because it helps this reach more people who genuinely need to hear it. I want to tell you something I've never said out loud before. I've spent years studying this, listening to hundreds of women describe, in their own words, exactly what made them fall completely, hopelessly for men older than them. And honestly, at first, I didn't believe it myself. I thought it was a cliché, a fantasy, something out of a movie, until I watched the same pattern repeat itself, over and over, without a single exception. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't luck. This was behavior. This was something that could actually be learned. And that's exactly what I'm about to walk you through, slowly, honestly, the way I'd want someone to explain it to me if I were sitting where you are right now. Before we even get into the list, let me set the scene for you, because I think it matters. I didn't come to this understanding sitting behind a desk reading theory. I came to it by living it, by watching my friends live it, by sitting across from women who trusted me enough to tell me the truth about what actually happens behind closed doors. Not the version they post online, the real version. And what struck me every single time was how small the details were. Nobody ever told me about some grand gesture, some perfect night planned to the minute. What they told me about were tiny moments. A pause, a look, a hand resting somewhere without asking for anything in return. That's where I want to start with you. So here's the first one, and it's the foundation everything else is built on. A younger man wants the result. An older man wants the journey there. That one difference alone splits the world into two completely different experiences. Rushing is the single biggest killer of desire there is, and nobody ever sits you down and teaches you that. Not in school, not from your friends, not from anything you've ever watched. Let me paint you a picture, something you can actually see in your mind. Imagine two different versions of the same night. In the first one, a couple gets home after dinner, and the man already has his hand on the doorknob before she's even finished her sentence, his mind halfway through the next step, before this one has even ended. There's no lingering, no breath, no moment, just motion. Now, picture the second version. Same apartment, same door, but this time he pauses for a second before turning the key. He looks at her. Maybe he makes some small, silly comment about something from the night, something that makes her laugh in that real, unguarded way. And only after that little pause has been allowed to exist do the two of them actually walk inside. On paper, that difference looks tiny. In real life, it's enormous. In the first version, she feels like a step in someone's plan. In the second, she feels like the moment itself mattered, not because of what came after, but simply because it was happening. A man who's actually lived a little understands that time spent well is worth more than any rushed performance ever could be. And it's exactly that calm, that ownership of his own pace, that makes a younger woman feel, maybe for the first time in her life, that she doesn't have to hurry, doesn't have to rush, doesn't have to pretend everything's fine when it isn't. So let me ask you something, and I want you to actually answer it honestly, even if it's just to yourself. Have you ever caught yourself checking the clock while you're with someone? Or is your mind already 3 steps ahead before the moment in front of you has even had a chance to breathe? Hold on to that answer, because it's going to matter a lot more in a few minutes than it does right now. Here's the second one, and this one stings a little for a lot of you watching. Most people listen just so they can respond, not so they can actually understand. That's a mistake I saw over and over again once I really started paying attention to this. Let me give you something simple to picture. Imagine she's telling you about a rough day at work, or some silly little argument she had with a friend. The man who's only listening to respond is already, somewhere in the back of his mind, assembling his advice, his solution, the clever line he's going to drop the second she stops talking. He hasn't even finished hearing her out, and he's already rehearsing what he's going to say. Now picture the other kind of man. He hears the exact same story, but instead of preparing a response, he asks a question back. He asks how it made her feel. He asks whether she wants advice or just wants to vent. That question alone, small, almost silly on paper, completely changes the texture of the conversation, because it shows he was actually there with her, not just waiting for his turn. And here's something I've never really admitted publicly before. I've been on the other side of this. I've been with someone who pretended to listen, who nodded in all the right places, but who was, emotionally, 1,000 miles away the entire time. And it wasn't until I met someone who actually listened, who asked questions back, who remembered tiny little details I didn't even remember telling him, like the name of a coworker I'd mentioned once, weeks earlier in passing, that I truly understood the difference between being physically present and actually being present. Do you really listen, or are you just waiting for your turn to talk? Sit with that for a second, because the next one builds right on top of it. Number 3. This one might sound small at first, but I promise you it isn't. An insecure man fills every single moment with noise, nervous chatter, forced jokes, silence he can't stand for more than a few seconds without needing to break it. Picture a car ride, the two of you driving back from somewhere, and for maybe a full minute, nobody says a word. A minute doesn't sound like much on paper, but inside a quiet car, it can feel like forever if you're not comfortable in it. The insecure man turns on the radio, comments on traffic, asks some random question just to fill the empty space. The confident man lets that minute exist. Sometimes he'll just reach over, take her hand without saying anything at all, and keep driving. And it's funny, because more often than not, it's in exactly that kind of quiet, unplanned moment that a woman thinks to herself, with him, I feel safe even in the silence. A man who's actually confident lets silence exist. He understands that well-built tension is worth more than 1,000 words thrown out just to fill space. And it's exactly in that empty space, that silence most people are terrified of, that real attraction quietly settles in. Before I move on, let me ask you something quick. If you've ever felt that kind of silence, the kind that says more than any conversation could, drop it in the comments below. I want to read every single one. Number 4, and this is the number one mistake I see so many younger men make, over and over again. They rush straight to the ending without ever understanding that most of the attraction happens long before that. Let me give you something really practical here, something you can actually use. This isn't about grand gestures, expensive trips, or pricey gifts. It's about something as small as sending a text at 3 p.m. on a random Wednesday. No reason at all. Just something like, just thought of you, hope your day's going okay. No hidden agenda in that message. No request buried inside it. Just that. Or it's about the way you hold a look 1 second longer than expected in the middle of an ordinary conversation, building a good kind of tension without needing to say a single word. Or it's a light touch on the arm while she's telling you something that matters to her, a way of saying, I'm here, I'm present, I'm listening, without needing any words at all. That's real seduction, and it works infinitely better than anything purely physical ever could. I remember a time when I completely underestimated that kind of gesture. I thought it was cheesy, thought it was nothing special, until I realized that it's exactly those small gestures that stay burned into someone's memory, long after everything else has faded away. A friend of mine once told me something I've never forgotten. She said she couldn't remember a single expensive gift she'd ever received, but she remembered, in perfect detail, some random little text she got years earlier, just because someone happened to think of her in the middle of an ordinary day. Number 5, a wrong compliment pushes people away. The right compliment pulls them in, and the gap between the two is enormous. A man who's lived a little doesn't say generic lines like he's reading off some memorized script. Notice the difference between these two examples. You look beautiful today is a sentence anyone could say to anyone in any context, without putting in any real effort to actually observe the person in front of them. Now imagine someone saying instead, I love the way you talk with your hands when you get excited telling a story, like your whole body gets involved in it. That's an entirely different level of compliment, because it requires someone to have actually paid attention, to have noticed something specific, something unique. something that only exists in that one person. He notices the specific detail, the way she laughs in a way that's completely her own, the way her eyes light up when she talks about something she genuinely loves, and that no woman forgets easily. Let me ask you directly, the last compliment you gave someone, was it specific, unique, thought through, or was it just an automatic, "You look beautiful," you'd say to pretty much anyone? Hold on to that answer too. We're almost at the halfway point, and what's coming next is going to tie everything together. Number 6. Emotional security is the strongest aphrodisiac there is, and it's exactly what's missing in most men, regardless of age. A man who's lived through some things has already been rejected before. He's felt that weight, he's survived it, and he's learned, sometimes in the hardest way possible, that a no doesn't define his worth as a person. Picture 2 different reactions to a simple rejection, like asking someone out and hearing no. The insecure reaction is to push, to ask for an explanation, to try to argue why that no should become a yes, or to go cold and distant afterward as a kind of quiet punishment. The secure reaction is to simply accept it, move on calmly, no drama, no visible resentment. And it's interesting, because the more someone shows they're genuinely okay with a no, the more respect and attraction they end up generating, precisely because of that. I've lived through a rejection that hurt deeply, more than I probably let on at the time. And what I learned from watching how different people handled it, some well, some not so well, is that the real difference was never in the rejection itself. It was always in how someone chose to carry themselves afterward. And now we've arrived at the one I promised you at the very beginning. Number 7, the most important one of all, and the reason I asked you to stay with me this far. A man who's lived a little has learned, usually through a fair amount of pain along the way, how to manage his own anxiety. He doesn't react on impulse. He responds with intention. Here's an example that really illustrates this well. Picture a conflict, some ordinary disagreement, maybe over a plan that changed at the last minute. The man who hasn't learned to manage his anxiety responds right away, in the heat of it, often saying things he doesn't even mean, just to relieve the discomfort of the moment. The man who's mastered this instead takes a step back before responding. Sometimes he'll literally ask for a minute, say something like, "Let me think about this for a second before I respond properly," and come back with something far more grounded. It sounds small, but it completely changes the dynamic of any relationship because it removes that constant undertone of reactivity that quietly wears down every connection over time. And that changes the entire experience of being close to him because the other person feels, without needing a single word, that they're standing next to someone who's actually in control of his own emotional life, not someone constantly chasing approval. Is this something you learn? Or are some people just born this way? I'll answer that honestly. It's learned. And it's learned the hardest way there is. By living through it, by getting it wrong, and by choosing, deliberately, to do it differently the next time. If this one hit home for you, go ahead and comment the word presence right now. I want to know how many of you already understand this in practice, and how many of you are still working on it. Number 8. A younger man, more often than not, separates physical intimacy from emotional connection, as if they're 2 completely unrelated things. A man who's lived a little has learned that when you bring the 2 together, the entire experience multiplies in a way no isolated technique could ever replicate. A practical example of this is the simple habit of asking about someone's day, and actually listening to the answer, not as a formality, but out of genuine interest. Asking how that important meeting she mentioned went, remembering that she was nervous about a decision and following up on it days later. That kind of ongoing attention, spread out over time rather than saved for special occasions, is exactly what builds a foundation of intimacy that physical connection alone could never build on its own, he asks. He's genuinely interested in her day, her dreams, her fears, and that creates a kind of closeness that no physical performance could ever replace. Number 9. There's a huge difference between needing to prove something and simply carrying yourself with natural ease. An insecure man competes. He competes with her ex, with some standard he saw online, with his own internal anxiety. Let me give you a really direct example. Imagine she mentions, with absolutely no hidden meaning behind it, something an ex used to do. The insecure man hears that as a threat, immediately shifts into comparison mode, tries somehow to prove he's better at that specific thing. The man who's grounded hears the exact same comment with total ease, doesn't feel threatened at all, because he isn't competing with anyone. He's simply being himself. That absence of any need to compete is felt instantly, and it's incredibly attractive precisely because it's so rare. A grounded man leads the moment, because he genuinely has nothing left to prove to anyone, least of all to himself. Do you compete, or do you lead? That question alone separates two completely different kinds of men. Number 10. We're living in a time when almost nobody really looks at anybody anymore. Everyone's got half their attention on their phone, half their mind on the next notification that could come through at any second. Picture a dinner table, the two of you sitting there, and his phone buzzes on the table. The average man glances at it almost by reflex, without even meaning to be rude about it. The man who's mastered this doesn't even look, or he'll pick it up and turn it face down before he even sits down at the table. It sounds like such a small gesture, almost insignificant, but the cumulative effect of that, repeated night after night, dinner after dinner, conversation after conversation, creates a sense of being genuinely prioritized that almost nobody else offers anymore. A man who gives his full attention, no distractions, no phone in hand, no part of his mind somewhere else, has become genuinely rare. And these days, rare is exactly what's most attractive. Number 11, the last one, the one that ties everything I've told you together. A younger man, more often than not, demands desire. He wants it to happen, expects it to happen, sometimes even pressures for it to happen. A man who's lived a little builds desire instead, brick by brick, gesture by gesture, with absolutely no rush at all. If I had to sum this up in one image, it would be this. Demanded desire is like trying to light a fire by dumping an entire can of gasoline on it at once. It burns hot, fast, and bright, and then it's gone almost as quickly as it started. Built desire is like lighting a fire carefully, one small piece of kindling at a time, letting it catch slowly, patiently, but once it does, it burns for hours without needing anything else added to it. That difference alone explains why so many younger women say that once they've experienced this with someone older, there's simply no going back to anything less. Now, I want to be completely honest with you about the real problem underneath all of this. Most men, no matter how old they are, were never actually taught any of this. Nobody teaches it. Society teaches technique. It teaches performance. It teaches you to memorize the right line to say at the right moment. Nobody teaches presence. Nobody teaches real listening. Nobody teaches genuine emotional security. And the solution to that has absolutely nothing to do with how many years you've lived. It has everything to do with a decision. Any man with awareness and consistent practice can develop every single one of these 11 qualities, starting not tomorrow, not next week, but the exact moment this video ends. If you've made it this far with me, that already says something about you. It tells me you're not someone looking for a shortcut. You're someone who genuinely wants to understand, genuinely wants to grow. So here's what I'd love for you to do right now. Tell me in the comments below, which of these 11 points hit you the hardest? It doesn't have to be the easiest one to admit to. Honestly, it might be the one that made you a little uncomfortable, and that's okay. Go ahead and like this video if you made it all the way through without skipping a single part, because that tells me exactly what kind of content I need to bring you more of. And subscribe right now, because next week I'm turning this mirror around and showing you the other side. What makes a woman completely unforgettable to a man, in a way he can never quite shake. You don't have to have been born knowing any of this. Nobody is. This gets built, day by day, decision by decision, and the only real difference between the people who actually live this out and the people who just watch videos about it is having the courage to put it into practice the moment this screen goes dark. So hold on to this. You already have everything you need inside you to become exactly this. The only question left is one, and only you can answer it. Are you going to decide to start today, or are you going to keep putting it off forever? I'll see you in the next one.